Wednesday, 7:48 a.m. The elevator doors opened on the 14th floor, and I knew something was wrong before I reached my office. My coffee mug was sitting on Jenny's reception desk instead of where I'd left it, and my keycard didn't beep when I swiped it. Just a flat red light and a dead lock. Jenny wouldn't look at me. She kept her eyes on her screen, typing nothing, fingers moving over keys, like she was pretending to work. 23 years I'd walked past that desk every morning, and she'd never once avoided eye contact. I'm Daniel Mercer. I'm 54 years old, and I was about to find out that the nephew of the man who built Brennan Whitmore Engineering had just ended my career with a memo I hadn't been copied on. Kyle Whitmore was waiting in the conference room. 31 years old, jaw like a catalog model, wearing a suit that cost more than my first car. He'd been COO for exactly 5 months, ever since his uncle Robert brought him in from a consulting gig in Manhattan where, from what I could tell, his primary skill was making PowerPoint decks look expensive. Daniel. Sit down. I didn't sit. I stood in the doorway of the conference room where I'd presented hundreds of structural analyses, where I'd argued over load-bearing calculations and wind shear tolerances and foundation depths until 2 a.m. during deadline crunches. The room smelled like Kyle's cologne, something sharp and chemical that didn't belong in a place where people did real work. He slid a folder across the table. Inside was a single sheet of paper, termination of employment, effective immediately, signed by Kyle Whitmore, Chief Operating Officer. We're restructuring the Senior Engineering Division. Your position has been eliminated. My position, Chief Structural Engineer, the guy who designed Bridgecore, the proprietary analysis software that won us every major infrastructure contract in the state of Illinois for the past 15 years. The software that was currently the backbone of our $380 million Lakeshore Corridor project with the city of Chicago, the biggest public works contract in the Midwest this decade. What Kyle didn't know, standing there in his Italian suit with that practiced look of corporate sympathy, was that he'd just pulled a pin on a grenade that was going to blow up a $450 million acquisition deal. And he'd done it exactly 72 hours before my $160,000 project completion bonus was scheduled to clear. 72 hours. That was the number that mattered. See, 12 years ago, Harold Brennan, the man who founded this company with a pickup truck and a surveyor's level in 1987, sat me down at Miller's Pub on Wabash Avenue after we'd just pulled an all-nighter saving a failing overpass design on the Dan Ryan. Hal was 63 then, already talking about retirement, worried about what would happen to the company when he stepped back. He'd seen what happened to other Chicago engineering firms when the founders left. Tang and Associates, gutted by private equity. Knight Engineering, sold off for parts. He wasn't going to let that happen to the work we'd built. Hal poured me a Goose Island and said something I've carried with me ever since. He said, "Danny, the suits are going to come eventually. They always do. And when they decide the people who built this place are too expensive to keep around, I want to make sure the work survives, even if the company doesn't." So he wrote a clause into my contract. Simple, elegant, and buried deep enough that nobody would find it unless they knew to look. If my employment was terminated without cause before any active project completion bonus was paid, full intellectual property rights to Bridgecore, including every patent, every licensing agreement, every line of proprietary code, would automatically transfer to me, not to the company, to me personally, filed with the state, notarized, sitting in a safety deposit box at First Midwest Bank on LaSalle Street. The logic was beautiful. If the company fired me to avoid paying my bonus, they'd lose something worth 100 times more than what they saved. It was Hal's insurance policy against exactly the kind of stupidity Kyle Whitmore had just committed. I signed the termination papers without a word. Kyle looked relieved, like he'd been bracing for a fight. He had no idea the fight hadn't started yet. On my way out, I stopped at my office. They'd already changed the lock, but I didn't need to get inside. Everything important was backed up on encrypted servers that required my biometric authentication, a system I'd designed myself back when we were a 40-person shop working out of a converted warehouse in Pilsen. I'd built the digital infrastructure of this company the same way I built bridges. Redundant, resilient, and impossible to bypass without the right credentials. I walked through the lobby past the wall of awards we'd won. The ENR Award of Merit for the Navy Pier renovation. The ASCE Outstanding Project for the Millennium Park Pedestrian Bridge. My name was on half of them. I pushed through the revolving door and stepped onto Dearborn Street, the January wind hitting me like a slap. Chicago in winter doesn't ease you into the cold. It announces itself. I sat in my truck in the parking garage on Wacker Drive, Engine running, heater blasting, and I pulled up the calendar on my phone. Friday, 5 p.m. That's when the completion bonus was scheduled to process. 72 hours from now. If that payment didn't hit my account, and it wouldn't since I was no longer an employee, Bridgecore became mine. And without Bridgecore, Brennan Whitmore had nothing. The Lakeshore Corridor project would stall. The city of Chicago would invoke penalty clauses. And Meridian National, the Houston-based mega firm that had been circling for months with a $450 million acquisition offer, would walk away from a deal built entirely on the promise of Bridgecore's capabilities. I drove home through traffic on the Kennedy, the same route I'd taken for 23 years, past the skyline I'd helped shape in small but real ways. Every bridge approach, every overpass support, every retaining wall along the expressway, I could tell you the soil composition and load calculations from memory. This city was in my bones. Susan was in the kitchen when I walked in, packing lunches for the elementary school where she worked as the nurse. She looked up and read my face the way she'd been reading it for 28 years of marriage. Kyle? Kyle. She set down the sandwich she was making and gave me her full attention. Our son David was at work already. He was an electrician's apprentice with IBEW Local 134 and started his shifts at 6. The house was quiet, except for the radio. Susan always kept on, WGN, playing traffic reports and weather. How bad? Terminated. Effective immediately. No notice, no severance discussion, just a folder and a handshake I didn't accept. That little... She paused, glanced toward the hallway like David might still be home. That arrogant little trust fund brat. Susan had met Kyle once, at the company Christmas party last year. She'd watched him hold court at the bar, telling stories about deals he'd closed in New York to people who'd been building actual structures while he was still in prep school. She'd leaned over to me that night and whispered, "That one's going to break something expensive someday." She was right. She usually was. The bonus, she said, the completion bonus for Lakeshore, $160,000, was supposed to clear Friday. She whistled. That was going to be David's wedding fund. He and Maria are already looking at venues. I poured myself coffee from the pot she'd brewed, the Intelligentsia blend we'd been buying from the shop on Broadway since they opened. Through the kitchen window, I could see Mr. Papadopoulos next door shoveling his sidewalk, same as he did every morning after a snow. Normal people doing normal things. There's more, I said. Remember Hal's retirement dinner? The speech he gave about protecting the work? Susan set down her coffee mug and looked at me hard. I told her about the clause. Every detail. Her expression shifted from anger to surprise to something I could only describe as strategic calculation. She'd been a nurse in Chicago public schools for 20 years, dealing with administrators and budget cuts and impossible situations. She knew how to assess a crisis. So if they don't pay the bonus, you own Bridgecore, automatically. It's been sitting in escrow for 12 years, waiting for exactly this trigger. And without Bridgecore, the Lakeshore project can't proceed. The structural analysis models are proprietary. You can't swap them out mid-project any more than you can swap out a building's foundation after you've built 10 stories on top of it. And the Meridian acquisition? Dead. Meridian's paying $450 million for a company that holds the most advanced structural analysis platform in the country. Without Bridgecore, they're paying $450 million for office furniture and Kyle Whitmore's cologne collection. Susan leaned back in her chair. Marcus, you need to be smart about this. Not angry. Smart. I looked at the clock on the microwave. 71 hours. 14 minutes until the bonus deadline. Wednesday, 2:15 p.m. My phone had been buzzing all morning. 3 missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize, 2 emails from reporters at Crane's Chicago Business, and a text from Marco Reyes, our best young structural engineer. I'd been mentoring Marco for 6 years, since he graduated from IIT with a civil engineering degree and a chip on his shoulder the size of the Sears Tower. His parents ran a bakery in Little Village, and Marco had that combination of South Side toughness and immigrant family work ethic that made him the kind of engineer who'd check his calculations 3 times before submitting, and still stay late to check them a 4th. Mr. Mercer, Kyle's got outside consultants in the Bridgecore server room. They can't get past the biometric locks. He's losing it. I called Marco back. How bad is it? He's talking about rebuilding the analysis models from scratch. Brought in some firm from San Francisco that claims they can replicate the system in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. I almost laughed. Bridgecore had taken me 8 years to develop. It incorporated 15 years of proprietary soil data from projects across 6 states, custom algorithms for seismic and wind load calculations specific to Midwestern geography, and integration with city permitting systems that I'd personally coded during weekends and late nights. You couldn't replicate it in 2 months, let alone 2 weeks. What did you tell them? That bridge core isn't just software, it's a complete structural intelligence system. The models are trained on decades of real-world project data that doesn't exist anywhere else. You can't just rebuild that. Good answer. Marco, I want you to know something. Whatever happens in the next few days, you've got a future in this industry. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. A pause. Sir, should I be worried about the Lakeshore project? There are 300 people on that job site. If the analysis platform goes down mid-construction, I know what's at stake. That's why I need you to trust me. After we hung up, I went to my home office and opened the countdown I'd set on my laptop. 68 hours, 45 minutes. Then I composed an email to Patricia Owens, the longest-serving board member at Brennan Whitmore. Patricia had been there since Hal's early days, a structural engineer herself before she moved into management, one of the few people at the company who actually understood what Bridgecore was and why it mattered. Patricia, I'm sure you're hearing from the Lakeshore project team about technical access issues. As you know, my departure triggers certain contractual obligations regarding intellectual property that may affect the company's licensing arrangements. If the board wants to discuss options before Friday's deadline, I'm available, but not through Kyle. Daniel, I sent it and watched the cursor blink. Thursday, 6:30 a.m. I woke up to gray light filtering through the bedroom curtains and the sound of the L train rumbling past 4 blocks away. Susan was already up, getting ready for work. I could hear her in the bathroom, the familiar rhythm of her morning routine that had been the soundtrack of my life for almost 3 decades. My phone showed 7 missed calls. Patricia Owens had replied at 1:47 a.m. Emergency board session tonight. Robert is aware. Kyle doesn't know yet. Stand by. I went downstairs and made coffee. Through the kitchen window, Chicago looked the way it always does in January. Gray and hard and beautiful in a way only people who live here understand. The kind of city that doesn't apologize for its weather or its attitude. The phone rang at exactly 8. Commissioner James Liu from the Chicago Department of Transportation. Mr. Mercer, we have a situation. Our project oversight team ran a routine verification on the Lakeshore Corridor structural models yesterday and received access denied errors across the entire Bridgecore platform. I need to understand what's happening. Commissioner, I'm no longer employed by Brennan Whitmore as of yesterday morning. Silence. Then, very carefully, Mr. Mercer, the city of Chicago has a $380 million contract that depends on continuous access to certified structural analysis systems. If those systems are compromised or unavailable, we're looking at project suspension, penalty clauses, and potential safety reviews of all work completed to date. You'll need to contact Brennan Whitmore's current leadership for technical access. We have. And I could hear him choosing his words, unable to provide the required certifications at this time. That's unfortunate. Mr. Mercer, I'll be direct. If we can't verify structural integrity models within 48 hours, I'm legally obligated to halt construction and order an independent safety review. That means 300 workers sent home, 6 months of delays, and approximately $40 million in penalty costs. I understood what he was saying. He was also telling me, without telling me, that the city would be very interested in talking to whoever ended up controlling Bridgecore. Commissioner, I'd suggest reaching out to the board of directors, specifically Patricia Owens. She understands the technical situation better than anyone currently in leadership. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table and thought about those 300 workers, iron workers and concrete finishers and crane operators who showed up at 5 a.m. in January cold to build something that would outlast all of us. They didn't deserve to lose paychecks because Kyle Whitmore wanted to save $160,000 on my bonus. Linda, I started, then caught myself. Susan, am I doing the right thing? She sat down across from me, still in her school nurse scrubs with the little cartoon Band-Aids printed on them. You're asking because of the workers. 300 people on that job site. If construction stops, you didn't stop construction. Kyle did, when he fired the only person who could keep Bridgecore running. But I could fix it right now. One phone call and I could restore access. You could. And then what? Kyle learns nothing. The next senior engineer he decides is too expensive gets the same treatment. And Hal's clause, the one he spent 12 years making sure would protect the work, becomes meaningless. She was right, but being right didn't make the next 44 hours easier. Thursday, 11 a.m. Crane's Chicago business published a story about personnel disruptions at Brennan Whitmore affecting the Lakeshore Corridor project. By noon, the engineering news record had picked it up. By 2, Meridian National stock was down 3% on rumors that their marquee acquisition was in trouble. My phone rang. Robert Whitmore, the CEO, Kyle's uncle, the man who'd taken over when Hal retired 8 years ago and, to his credit, had run the company well until he'd made the mistake of trusting family over judgment. Daniel. His voice sounded like gravel. I owe you an apology. You do. Kyle acted without board approval. I didn't know about the termination until Patricia called me last night. I've been in meetings since midnight trying to understand the full scope of what he's done. And it's bad. Meridian is asking questions we can't answer. The city is threatening project suspension. Our insurance carrier wants to know if we have valid licensing for our core analysis platform. Robert paused. Daniel, Hal's clause. Patricia showed me the filing. I had no idea. Hal didn't want you to know. He wanted it to work when it needed to, not be negotiated away when it was convenient. A long silence. What do you want, Daniel? I looked at the countdown. 30 hours, 58 minutes. I want to have a conversation, but not until after Friday at 5. Daniel, if we wait that long, then you'd better hope Kyle's San Francisco consultants are as good as he thinks they are. Thursday, 4 p.m. Patricia Owens called. Daniel, the board met again this afternoon. Kyle has been relieved of his position. Robert abstained from the vote, but it was unanimous otherwise. I appreciated Patricia's directness. She'd never been one for corporate doublespeak, maybe because she'd spent the first 15 years of her career on job sites, not in boardrooms. That's a start, I said. There's more. We'd like to propose a consulting arrangement. Full reinstatement of your project access. $3,000 per day through the Lakeshore completion, plus your original bonus. Patricia, by tomorrow at 5, I'll own Bridgecore outright. You know that. I do, which is why I'm asking you to consider what Hal would want. He built this company to serve Chicago, to build things that matter. If Bridgecore leaves Brennan Whitmore, the Lakeshore project collapses, and 300 people lose their jobs. Not to mention every other active project running on the platform. That hit where she intended it to hit. I'll think about it, but I want to be in the room Friday, and I want Marco Reyes there too. The young engineer? Why? Because he's the future of structural engineering at this company, and he deserves to be at the table when decisions about that future are made. Thursday, 9 p.m. Susan and I sat on the couch after dinner, watching the snow fall outside our front window. David had stopped by earlier with Maria, and we'd had pasta and garlic bread and the kind of loud, overlapping conversation that happens when our family is together. Maria had been showing Susan pictures of wedding venues on her phone while David and I argued about whether the Bears would ever build a new stadium. Normal family stuff. The kind of evening I'd missed too many of during the past 23 years of late nights and weekend emergencies, and always putting the work first. My phone buzzed. An email from Thomas Huang, Meridian National CEO, Mr. Mercer. Meridian is prepared to discuss a direct arrangement for Bridgecore licensing independent of Brennan Whitmore's corporate structure. $12 million, 3-year consulting agreement. Please call at your convenience. I showed Susan. She read it twice. That's retire tomorrow money, she said quietly. I know. What does your gut say? My gut says Hal didn't build that clause so I could cash out. He built it so the work would be protected. And what does your head say? My head says we should probably at least hear what they're offering before I make a decision worth $12 million based on loyalty to a dead man's wishes. She smiled. That's the smartest thing you've said all week. Friday, 8 a.m. I walked into Brennan Whitmore's lobby wearing a visitor's badge. The irony wasn't lost on me. 23 years of building this company's reputation, and now I needed permission to enter the building. Jenny at reception smiled when she saw me. This time she looked me right in the eyes. Welcome back, Mr. Mercer. Conference room B was full. Patricia Owens sat at the head of the table. Robert Whitmore was there, looking like he'd aged a decade in 3 days. 2 other board members I recognized. Thomas Huang had sent his VP of acquisitions from Houston, and in the corner, looking nervous but alert, was Marco Reyes in a sport coat I'd never seen him wear before. Patricia opened. Daniel, thank you for coming. I think everyone in this room understands the situation, but let me state it clearly. As of 5 p.m. today, if Daniel's completion bonus is not paid, full IP ownership of Bridgecore transfers to him under a clause written by our founder Harold Brennan 12 years ago. Without Bridgecore, our Lakeshore contract is in jeopardy, our Meridian acquisition is dead, and this company's future is uncertain. Robert spoke next. Daniel, before we discuss anything else, I want to say something about Kyle. He made a decision that was arrogant, short-sighted, and disrespectful to everything you've contributed to this company. I brought him in because he's family, and I thought I could teach him the business. I was wrong. He wasn't ready. I nodded. I wasn't going to pile on. Kyle was 31. I'd made plenty of stupid decisions at 31. The difference was that my stupid decisions hadn't threatened hundreds of people's livelihoods. I looked at the clock on the wall. 9:07 a.m. 7 hours, 53 minutes. Here's what I want, I said. I'd spent the whole drive downtown organizing my thoughts, running through scenarios the way I ran through structural calculations, testing each one for weak points. First, Marco Reyes gets promoted to Director of Structural Engineering. Full authority over Bridgecore development, direct report to the board, not to whatever COO you hire next. I've spent 6 years training him. He knows this platform better than anyone except me, and in 2 years he'll know it better than I do. Patricia looked at Marco. Marco looked at me. I gave him a small nod. Done, Patricia said. Second, Brennan Whitmore establishes a technical succession protocol. No critical system in this company ever depends on a single person again. You document everything, you cross-train teams, and you build redundancy into your human capital, the same way I build it into bridge supports. Robert nodded slowly. That's fair. And overdue. Third, my bonus pays today as scheduled, all $160,000. I've earned it. Of course, Patricia said. Fourth, I'll consult on the Lakeshore completion and the Meridian transition. 6 months, part-time, $200 an hour. After that, I'm done. For real. No emergency calls, no weekend requests, no just one more project. And Bridgecore? Robert asked. I looked at the clock. 9:14 a.m. I had until 5 to decide. Bridgecore stays with the company. I'll execute a licensing agreement that keeps full rights with Brennan Whitmore for all current and future projects. But I'm adding a condition. Call it the Brennan Clause, Part 2. If at any point the company terminates a senior technical employee without cause within 12 months of a major contract deadline, the affected employee automatically receives co-ownership rights to any system they contributed to building. You want to fire people? Fine. But you'll think twice about doing it to save a buck right before payday. The room was quiet. Thomas Huang's VP was scribbling notes furiously. Robert stared at the table. Patricia, I noticed, was trying not to smile. Robert finally spoke. That's a hell of a condition, Daniel. It's the condition Hal would have wanted if he'd thought of it. I'm just finishing what he started. More silence. Then Patricia, all in favor? 4 hands went up. Robert hesitated, then raised his. Unanimous. My phone buzzed at 10 a.m. Not the bonus. That would come later. It was a text from a number I hadn't seen in 2 years. Hal Brennan, calling from whatever golf course in Scottsdale he'd retired to. Patricia told me everything. Proud of you, Danny. Knew that clause would come in handy someday. Don't let them forget what matters. I typed back, never did, never will. At exactly 5 p.m., my phone buzzed with a bank notification. $160,000 deposited to my checking account. The clause remained dormant. Bridgecore stayed with the company, under terms that would protect the next Daniel Mercer and the one after that. Marco found me in the lobby as I was turning in my visitor's badge. Mr. Mercer, I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything. Just do the work. Take care of the people who do it with you, and read every contract they put in front of you, especially the fine print. He laughed, then got serious. Thank you. My parents, they're going to. This means everything to our family. I shook his hand. That mattered more than the bonus. Friday, 7:30 p.m. Susan and I sat at our kitchen table with Italian beef sandwiches from Al's on Taylor Street, the ones with the giardiniera that makes your eyes water, and 2 bottles of Goose Island 312. The house was warm. David had called to say he and Maria had put a deposit on a venue in Bridgeport, a converted warehouse with exposed brick and a view of the river. So, Susan said, biting into her sandwich, how does it feel? I thought about it. Honestly, lighter. like I took off a backpack I forgot I was wearing. Good lighter? The best kind. The kind where you realize you've been carrying someone else's weight for so long you forgot what your own shoulders feel like without it. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. The radio was playing, WGN, as always, and through the window I could see the lights of our neighborhood, the bungalows and 2 flats where families like ours had been living for generations, building lives out of hard work and stubbornness, and the refusal to let a Chicago winter beat them. "What are you going to do with all this free time?" she asked. "First, I'm going to David and Maria's wedding without checking my email once. Then I'm going to fix that back porch step that's been creaking for 3 years. Then maybe we go somewhere warm for a week. Somewhere I don't have to think about load-bearing calculations." Susan smiled. "I've been waiting 23 years to hear you say that." My phone buzzed. One last text. Marco Reyes. "First thing tomorrow, I'm reading every contract in the building, top to bottom, even the fine print." I put the phone face down on the table. Marco didn't need my answer. He already knew what to do. Outside, the snow had stopped and the sky was clearing, the way it sometimes does in Chicago when the wind shifts and pushes the clouds east over the lake. You could see stars, just a few, the stubborn ones that refuse to be dimmed by city light. Some things, I realized, are worth more than $450.
They say just forget. Move on like it's easy. But forgetting you feels like remembering someone I've never seen. I've been trying to erase you from the places in my mind, but the harder that I fight it, the more you're hard to leave behind. Every memory keeps slipping through the cracks I try to close, like a face I should remember, but somehow never know. Forgetting you feels impossible, like chasing something I can't hold, like trying to remember someone that I've never even known. I keep reaching through the silence for a past I can't undo, 'cause letting go of what we had feels like losing something true. Every moment turns to fragments, every thought just fades to blue, like I'm searching for a feeling that still only leads to you. Forgetting you feels impossible, like chasing something I can't hold, like trying to remember someone that I've never even known. I keep reaching through the silence for a past I can't undo, 'cause letting go of what we had feels like losing something true. But now every empty moment still reminds me what is real. Forgetting you feels impossible, like chasing something I can't hold, like trying to remember someone that I've never even known. I keep reaching through the silence for a past I can't undo, 'cause letting go of what we had feels like losing something true. Don't pity me. My heart doesn't need your mercy. I can still stand on my own. I was broken by your leaving, Fell deeper than I thought I would, but pain has taught me how to heal now and survive what once I couldn't. You don't have to look back sadly, don't reach out with guilty hands. What you shattered made me stronger. Now I rise where I once collapsed. My heart doesn't need your pity, not another empty sign. I've got enough strength left within me to rebuild this life of mine. My feet are steady through the sorrow, I can stand through all the pain. You don't have to save me, darling, I'll learn to breathe again. I once begged for your affection, now I've learned my worth in scars. And the man you left in pieces found his own way through the dark. My heart doesn't need your pity, not another empty sign. I've got enough strength left within me to rebuild this life of mine. My feet are steady through the sorrow, I can stand through all the pain. You don't have to save me, darling, I'll learn to breathe again. Begun. My heart doesn't need your pity, not another empty sign. I've got enough strength left within me to rebuild this life of mine. My feet are steady through the sorrow, I can stand through all the pain. You don't have to save me, darling, I'll rise alone again. I'll rise alone